When my asthmatic mum couldn't catch her breath at our neighborhood's annual spring fling, our dictatorial HOA president confiscated her inhaler as punishment for violating their sacred community guidelines. How could Vanessa Kline possibly know that my frail, soft-spoken mother was actually a decorated Army CID special agent investigating their association's suspicious financial activities? The blue and red lights reflected off our living room windows as I watched the ambulance drive away with Mom inside, all because Vanessa couldn't mind her own business about our wind chimes. I stood in our driveway, shaking, partly from rage, partly from fear. Just 12 hours earlier, everything had been perfectly normal. I remember the exact moment Vanessa first targeted us. We'd barely finished unpacking in our new home in Oakridge Estates when a sharp knock interrupted our Chinese. "Take out dinner." There she stood on our doorstep in her navy blue blazer with gold buttons, clipboard clutched against her chest, pearl necklace gleaming in the porch light. "Welcome to Oakridge," she said, without a hint of warmth. "Your mailbox is non-regulation, 3 inches taller than permitted. Fix it by Monday." Mom politely invited her in for some spring rolls. Vanessa examined the takeout containers as if they contained toxic waste. "I prefer to keep our interactions strictly professional," she replied, nose slightly elevated. "I'm the president of the Oakridge Estates Homeowners Association. All community standards are outlined in the welcome packet. There are many. Adherence is non-negotiable." That was 4 months ago. Since then, she'd written us up for recycling bins visible from the street. They weren't. Exterior lights too bright. They were standard bulbs. And a bird feeder she claimed was attracting vermin. It was designed specifically to deter squirrels. Mom, who had served in the military for 26 years before taking what she called an administrative position at Fort Belvoir, tried to establish peaceful relations. She baked Vanessa a coffee cake, invited her to afternoon tea, even volunteered to help with community landscaping days. Vanessa responded by increasing her property compliance checks. What really infuriated Vanessa were our wind chimes. Simple, bamboo ones that Dad had brought back from his final deployment to Japan before his stroke 2 years ago. They hung gently from our back porch, barely audible unless a strong breeze came through. Those wind chimes disrupt the auditory aesthetic of Oakridge Estates, Vanessa declared during her 3rd visit in 10 days, pointing to a page in her 3-ring binder. Section 4, paragraph 12 clearly states that all external decorative elements must maintain the community's peaceful ambiance. The rules allow for tasteful outdoor decorations, Mom countered, showing her a different section in the same handbook. "These chimes stay." I noticed Mom's hand trembling slightly as she spoke, the first sign her asthma was acting up. At 59, the condition that had been well controlled during her military career was becoming more problematic since Dad's medical retirement. Yesterday was the Oakridge Estates Spring Fling. Vanessa had announced a special community meeting beforehand to address ongoing compliance concerns. When we arrived at the clubhouse, I immediately sensed something was wrong. Too many neighbors glanced our way and quickly averted their eyes. "So pleased you could join us," Vanessa said into the microphone as we found seats near the back. "I was just discussing property values and how certain residents seem determined to undermine them." She clicked to a PowerPoint slide showing a photo of our house with our wind chimes circled in bright red. "This is precisely the kind of non-standard ornamentation that discourages quality buyers." Mom stood up, her posture suddenly straighter than I'd seen in months. "Vanessa, this is inappropriate for a community event. The bylaws clearly state..." "The bylaws state that I maintain community standards," Vanessa interrupted, her voice sharp. "And your persistent attitude has been duly noted." Several neighbors looked uncomfortable, though a few of Vanessa's friends nodded emphatically. Those chimes were a gift from my husband during his final deployment, Mom explained, her voice catching slightly. I could hear the faint wheeze that signaled her asthma was flaring. Before his stroke. Your personal circumstances aren't relevant to community guidelines, Vanessa snapped, walking toward us, and this display of emotion is disruptive. Mom's breathing grew increasingly labored. She reached into her purse for her rescue inhaler as she tried to continue speaking. You're exceeding your authority as Vanessa did something I still can't believe. She marched forward and snatched the inhaler directly from Mom's hand. This behavior is exactly what undermines our community harmony. Shocked gasps echoed around the room. Mom tried to retrieve her medication, but Vanessa stepped away, dropping the inhaler into her designer handbag. You'll get this back when you learn some manners, she said with chilling calmness. Meeting adjourned. As people began filing out, some looking concerned, others deliberately avoiding eye contact, Mom collapsed into her chair, struggling for breath. I pushed past two of Vanessa's board member friends who tried to block my path and rushed to Mom's side. Someone called 911 while I screamed at Vanessa to return the inhaler. Mom's lips were beginning to take on a bluish tint. Your mother needs to understand there are consequences for disruptive behavior, Vanessa said, watching impassively as Mom gasped for air. The ambulance arrived 6 minutes later, the longest 6 minutes of my life. Your mother experienced a severe asthmatic episode, Dr. Mehta explained as we sat in the hospital consultation room. If the paramedics hadn't administered emergency medication when they did, he trailed off, but the implication was clear. I couldn't stop picturing Mom's desperate struggle for air while Vanessa stood there, inhaler in her purse, watching with cold detachment. Can I see her? I asked, my voice hoarse from crying. Dr. Mehta nodded. She's stabilized, but we're keeping her overnight for observation. She's asking for her phone, specifically mentioned it's urgent. When I entered Mom's hospital room, she looked surprisingly alert despite the oxygen cannula and monitoring equipment. Her first words caught me completely off guard. Jacob, I need you to get my secure phone, the one in the lockbox in my closet. Her voice was raspy but firm. Mom, you need to rest. I'm calling the police about Vanessa. What she did was assault, maybe even attempted. No police, Mom interrupted sharply. Not yet. Get my secure phone first. The combination is your birthday backward. I drove home in a daze, windshield wipers fighting against the sudden downpour. A certified letter from the HOA was already taped to our front door, in direct violation of their own regulations about proper mail delivery. Inside was a notice demanding a $750 fine for creating a public disturbance and interfering with HOA proceedings. It was signed by Vanessa with the official seal stamped beside her elaborate signature. Unbelievable, I muttered, tossing the letter onto the kitchen counter. In Mom's bedroom closet, I found the small fireproof lockbox, exactly where she said it would be. Inside was a phone I'd never seen before. Not her regular iPhone, but a specialized device with enhanced security features. There was also a small leather credential wallet I didn't recognize. When I returned to the hospital, Mom was sitting up, looking remarkably better, but with an intensity in her eyes I rarely saw outside of her arguments with Veterans Affairs about Dad's benefits. Lock the door, she instructed. I did, confused but compliant. Mom, what's going on? Why do you have a special phone? And what's this? I held up the credential wallet. Sit down, Jacob. Her voice had changed completely, not the gentle tone of my mother, who volunteered at the library book sales, but something authoritative and commanding. There's something you need to know. She took the phone, entered a complex passcode, and made a call. Special Agent Margaret Collins reporting. Authorization code Bravo Sierra 479. I need to speak with Colonel Richards immediately. A pause. Yes, sir. It's urgent. I stared at my mother in disbelief. My quiet, asthmatic mother, who made the best apple pie in Virginia and cried during dog food commercials, was speaking like someone I'd never met. "Sir, my cover may be compromised." The subject escalated to physical endangerment. Another pause. "Yes, she confiscated my rescue inhaler, which contains the C-29 recording device. No, I don't believe my identity is exposed, but we need to accelerate." Our timeline: when she hung up, Mum saw my shocked expression. She reached for the credential wallet I'd brought and opened it to reveal a gold badge and identification card. "I'm not just a military administrative assistant, Jacob. I'm a special agent with the Army Criminal Investigation Division. I've been with CID for 23 years. I laughed nervously. "Very funny, Mom. You taught Dad's squadron kids how to make friendship bracelets. You can barely use the DVR." "I did teach those kids," she replied calmly. "That was my cover at each base. But this—" She held up the badge. "Gus is who I really am." The badge was real. The identification card had her photo, her name, Margaret Collins, and credentials identifying her as a supervisory special agent with the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command. Vanessa Kline and her associates have been running a sophisticated fraud operation through multiple HOAs in areas surrounding military installations, Mom explained, her voice low. "They target communities with high percentages of active duty and veteran homeowners. The wind chimes, the mailbox, all those ridiculous violations." "Harassment tactics," Mom said. "They use excessive fines and threats to intimidate residents who might question their financial practices. They're particularly aggressive toward military families who move frequently and might not have the time or resources to fight back." "So our move here was an assignment," she confirmed. "We've been tracking unusual financial patterns across 7 HOAs in 3 states, all near military bases, all with the same management company, Pinnacle Community Services. The same company Vanessa brought in last year to professionalize Oakridge's operations." I felt like the room was spinning. The mother who had packed my lunches with little notes throughout high school, who had held Dad's hand through countless VA appointments after his stroke, was actually a covert military investigator. "The asthma?" I asked weakly. "Is, unfortunately, real," she sighed. "But my inhaler contains more than just albuterol. It has a specialized recording device that activates whenever I use it. It's been documenting my conversations with Vanessa and the board members for months." A gentle knock interrupted us. Mom quickly tucked away her badge as I opened the door. 2 people in business casual attire stood outside. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and a younger woman with close-cropped hair and the unmistakable posture of military training. "Agents Walker and Chen," the man said quietly, showing me his credentials. "We need to speak with Special Agent Collins." They entered, closing the door behind them. "Maggie, we've been monitoring the situation," Agent Walker said. "Colonel Richards has authorized immediate action based on the medical incident. Vanessa has called an emergency HOA board meeting for tomorrow morning to discuss our ongoing violations and potential eviction proceedings," I offered. The agents exchanged meaningful glances. "Perfect timing," Mom said. "The quarterly HOA fees were deposited last week. If their pattern holds, the money will move tomorrow after the meeting." "We'll have a full team in place," Agent Chen confirmed, unfolding a laptop to display a satellite map of our community center. "Your hospitalization actually works in our favor. It adds assault and reckless endangerment to the financial crimes charges." "What do you need me to do?" I asked, still struggling to reconcile the mother I'd known my entire life with this calm, strategic military investigator planning an operation from her hospital bed. Mom reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "Go home, act normal, attend the meeting tomorrow and record everything. We'll have agents nearby, but we need you as our eyes inside while I'm supposedly still here recovering. Won't Vanessa be suspicious when you're not there?" Mom smiled grimly. "Oh, I'll be there. Dr. Mehta is actually Captain Mehta, Medical Corps. I'll be discharged first thing in the morning." I drove home in a state of shock, nearly missing the unmarked government vehicles parked discreetly along different streets in our community. At home, the bamboo wind chimes seemed to greet me with their soft melody in the evening breeze. I wondered if they, too, contained some secret surveillance equipment. Sitting on our couch, I pulled out old photo albums, seeing my parents' lives through an entirely new lens. Dad's logistics position that required frequent travel, Mum's administrative. Jobs that always seemed to change bases alongside his assignments. The professional development conferences they attended separately. Then I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. In a family photo from a beach vacation 10 years ago, Mom wore a watch identical to the one Agent Chen had on her wrist. Had I been surrounded by military investigators my entire life without realizing it? Just after midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Operation active at 0700. Be prepared." I stared out the window at our quiet suburban street, wondering what would happen when Vanessa Kline discovered she hadn't just stolen a medical device from a vulnerable older woman. She'd stolen government property from a CID special agent who'd been building a case against her for months. I barely slept. By 6:30 a.m., I was dressed and making coffee when Mom walked through the front door. Gone was any trace of the hospital patient from yesterday. Her posture was straight, her movements precise. She wore a professional pantsuit I'd never seen before, and her eyes were sharp and focused. "Backup medical team is stationed 2 blocks away," she said, accepting the coffee I offered. "Agent Chen is coordinating with local police, and Walker is running point on digital surveillance." "How long have you been a CID agent?" I asked, still trying to process this new reality. "Since 2 years after I met your father," she replied, checking her secure phone. "I was military police before that. When the Criminal Investigation Command needed someone with my background for a special assignment, I transitioned to undercover work." "Did Dad know?" Her expression softened momentarily. "Your father was my handler until his stroke. He was Army intelligence before moving to logistics as cover. We weren't supposed to fall in love, but—" She shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. "Some operations don't go according to plan. I felt like my entire childhood had been rewritten in a single night. So, when you were teaching us how to make friendship bracelets, I was still." "Teaching you how to make friendship bracelets," she said firmly. "Being your mother was never a cover, Jacob. It was always my most important job." At 8:45 a.m., Mom gripped my arm outside the community center entrance. "Listen carefully," she whispered. "I need you to act surprised when I reveal who I am. This operation is bigger than Vanessa's petty power trip." Inside, every seat was filled. Neighbors whispered among themselves, many casting concerned glances our way. A few asked about Mom's health with genuine worry. Vanessa sat at the center table, flanked by her loyal board members, Richard and Pamela. My mother's inhaler sat in front of her like a trophy. "Running late as usual," Vanessa remarked, checking her designer watch. "We've called this emergency meeting to address the Collins family's ongoing violations and yesterday's disruptive outburst." Mum shuffled forward, shoulders hunched, playing the role of the frail asthmatic perfectly. I bit my lip, amazed by her acting skills. For months I'd watched her struggle with stairs and carry her emergency inhaler everywhere. Had that all been part of her cover? "Before we begin," Vanessa continued, tapping a thick folder of papers, "I want everyone to see the documentation of the Collins family's 23 violations since moving in just 4 months ago." She projected photos onto the wall, our mailbox, Mom's bird feeder, our wind chimes from multiple angles. "As you can clearly see," she gestured dramatically, "these people have absolutely no respect for our community standards. And yesterday, Mrs. Collins had the audacity to fake a medical episode during my presentation simply to disrupt proceedings and gain sympathy. Gasps filled the room. Even Vanessa's supporters looked uncomfortable with this accusation. "You stole my medication," Mom wheezed, her voice deliberately weak. "I could have died." "I confiscated a prop being used disruptively," Vanessa corrected, coldly, holding up the inhaler. "If you were truly ill, you'd have gone to the hospital." "I did go to the hospital," Mom said, her voice suddenly strong and clear. She reached into her purse and pulled out her badge wallet, holding it high. "And now I'm placing you under investigation. Vanessa Kline." The room erupted in confusion. Agents Walker and Chen entered from the back, wearing tactical vests with CID clearly visible. Richard and Pamela immediately tried to edge away from Vanessa. "This is Special Agent Margaret Collins," Walker announced. "She's been leading our investigation into financial irregularities across multiple HOA operations near military installations." Vanessa's face contorted with disbelief. "This is absurd. She's lying." Mom straightened to her full height, all traces of weakness gone. "That inhaler you've been displaying so proudly contains a recording device that has captured every conversation we've had, including your admission yesterday about using HOA emergency fund money for your condo in Florida." "You can't record me without my knowledge! That's illegal!" Vanessa shrieked, clutching the inhaler tighter. "Not when it's part of a military criminal investigation," Mom replied calmly. "We have bank statements showing over $350,000 in homeowner fees diverted to shell companies registered under your brother-in-law's name. We have evidence of falsified financial reports, and now, thanks to your theatrical display of authority yesterday, we have you on record admitting to deliberately endangering a federal agent by withholding life-saving medical equipment." Vanessa lunged forward, attempting to throw the inhaler to the ground, but Agent Chen intercepted her smoothly. "That's government property, ma'am," she said, securing the device in an evidence bag. Richard and Pamela began inching toward the exit, but Walker stepped into their path. "Don't bother. Your signatures are on the fraudulent fund transfers, too." My neighbor Marcus, a retired Marine who'd received 3 violation notices for his flagpole being 2 inches too tall, stood up, trembling. "They fined me $200 when I was deployed overseas because my pregnant wife couldn't mow the lawn during her complicated pregnancy." This opened the floodgates. Neighbors called out injustices one after another, excessive fines for minor infractions, arbitrary rule changes, selective enforcement against military families who weren't present year-round to fight back. "Enough," Vanessa screamed, slamming her hand on the table. "This community would collapse without my leadership. These people wouldn't know how to function without proper guidelines." Mom calmly opened her laptop, connecting it to the projector. The PowerPoint with our wind chimes disappeared, replaced by financial statements. "Residents of Oakridge Estates, these are your HOA financial records for the past 2 years. The highlighted entries show money transferred to Coastal Holdings, LLC and Sunbelt Investments, both registered to Gregory Kline, Vanessa's brother-in-law." Vanessa knocked over her chair as she stood. "You'll regret this. My husband plays golf with General Harriman." "General Harriman is fully briefed on this operation," Mom replied without missing a beat. "In fact, his office has received numerous complaints about predatory HOA practices targeting military families across 3 states. As agents led Vanessa, Richard, and Pamela outside, neighbors surrounded us with questions and thanks. One elderly veteran had tears in his eyes as he told Mom how they'd nearly lost their home to HOA legal fees after questioning maintenance charges. Mom held up her hand for quiet. "There's something else you should know," she said gravely. "Oakridge Estates was just one target. We've uncovered similar schemes in 14 communities surrounding military installations. Vanessa's group has been using these residential associations as fronts for laundering money from defense contractor kickback schemes." The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Our quiet suburban neighborhood had been at the center of a major military fraud investigation. They specifically targeted communities with high percentages of active duty and veteran homeowners, Mom continued. They counted on military families being too busy with deployments, relocations, and transitions to civilian life to notice financial discrepancies. While the room buzzed with shocked conversations, I finally found my voice. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked as we walked toward the exit. "All these months, I thought you were just struggling with your health." Mum squeezed my hand. "Because your genuine reactions sold my cover story. I couldn't risk Vanessa becoming suspicious if you suddenly started treating me differently." She paused by the door, looking back at the community center. "Also, I wasn't certain how deep this went. I needed to protect you." As we reached our driveway, Mum's secure phone rang. Her expression darkened as she listened. "We need to go back," she said urgently. "They found something in the community center storage room." Yellow evidence tape already blocked the entrance as we returned. Mum flashed her badge to the uniformed police officer, and he lifted the tape for us. "What did they find?" I whispered. "Documents," Mum replied tersely. "Lots of them." The storage room smelled musty, filled with folding chairs and holiday decorations. But agents were focused on a section of wall that had been moved aside, revealing a hidden room behind a false panel. "Margaret, perfect timing," Agent Walker waved us over. "Your instincts were spot on. This goes well beyond local HOA fraud." Inside, the hidden space, stacks of files reached the ceiling. A computer setup hummed in one corner, alongside what looked like professional printing equipment and lamination machines. "Identity theft?" Mom asked, pulling on latex gloves offered by a crime scene technician. "And much more," Walker replied, handing her a folder. "We've found evidence linking Vanessa's operation to defense contract bid rigging across 5 military installations." Mom opened the folder and inhaled sharply. Inside were copies of classified bidding documents, security clearance applications, and personnel files, all with military markings. They've been using HOA records to gather personal information on service members and their families, Agent Chen called from behind a filing cabinet. "Social security numbers, banking details, employment histories." Then using that to create falsified security clearance applications for contractor positions. My stomach dropped. "You mean they've been stealing military families' identities?" "Not just stealing them," another agent said, examining a hard drive. "Selling complete packages to individuals who couldn't otherwise obtain security clearances. Names, backgrounds, credit histories. Everything needed to pass initial screening for sensitive positions." Mom squared her shoulders. The CID agent, fully visible now beneath the suburban mother persona I'd always known. That's why they were so aggressive about collecting personal information during HOA registration and so insistent on having copies of military IDs for community security purposes, she said. "They weren't just after the HOA fees, they were harvesting data." An agent shouted from another corner, "We've got digital files. Looks like communications going back 3 years. These payments trace back to shell companies in 5 different countries." Mom examined the computer screen, her expression grim. "This is bigger than we anticipated. These transactions linked to companies flagged in 3 other investigations. Is that why the CID got involved?" I asked. "This seems way beyond normal HOA issues." Mom nodded. "We received intelligence about unusual financial activities in communities surrounding military bases, small HOAs suddenly purchasing expensive security systems, management companies being paid well above market rates, and most suspiciously, board members with no military connections, specifically targeting communities with high concentrations of service members." 6 months later, we stood in our driveway watching as new neighbors moved in across the street. The trial had made national headlines. Operation Wind Chime, how Army CID uncovered military identity, theft ring operating through HOAs. Vanessa and her associates received lengthy federal sentences. The mysterious clients who purchased the stolen identities were still being pursued, but the operation had been thoroughly dismantled. Our newly elected HOA board, led by Marcus, operated with a simple philosophy: respect and transparency. The wind chimes still hang on our porch, now joined by dozens throughout the neighborhood, a symbol of resistance against those who abuse power. Mom officially retired from CID last month. "Chasing criminals is a young agent's game," she laughed, a real inhaler in hand. "Besides, your father needs me more now." As I watch her helping Dad with his physical therapy exercises in the garden, I'm reminded of the most important lesson she taught me: never judge someone's strength by their apparent vulnerability. If you've enjoyed this true story about how my asthmatic mom took down a criminal enterprise while armed with nothing but an inhaler and decades of investigative experience, hit the subscribe button for more incredible real-life stories that prove heroes exist in the most unexpected places. Next week, how my quiet librarian uncle's rare book collection helped crack a decades-old art heist. You won't want to miss it.